The rain was relentless that night, hammering against my apartment window like it was trying to break through and drown me in my own sorrow. I sat there, curled up on my couch, a glass of cheap red wine trembling in my hand, staring at the email on my laptop screen. Effective immediately. Your employment with Horizon Enterprises is terminated. The words burned into my retinas, each syllable a knife twisting deeper into my chest. Fired. Me, the woman who'd clawed her way into the top 1% a company that chewed up ambition and spat out broken dreams. Fired for being too good. Can you even imagine the audacity of that? The sheer, gut-wrenching betrayal of it all. I'm not here to bore you with corporate jargon or some sanitized version of my story. No. I'm going to rip the bandage off and let you feel the raw, jagged edges of what happened to me, because this isn't just my story. It's a warning, a scream into the void about what happens when jealousy festers in the workplace, when your light shines too bright for the shadows to handle. Let's rewind. My name's Eleanor, and 6 months ago, I was on top of the world. Picture this. A 32-year-old woman who'd spent her 20s grinding, sacrificing weekends, relationships, even her own health, to prove she was worth something. I wasn't born with a silver spoon. My parents were teachers, scraping by in a small town where ambition was a dirty word. But I had fire in me, a hunger that wouldn't let me settle for mediocrity. I moved to the city at 22, armed with a degree and the stubborn refusal to fail. Horizon Enterprises wasn't my first rodeo. I'd bounced through a few soul-crushing jobs before landing there, but it was the place where I finally felt like I belonged. It was a tech giant, all glass towers and promises of innovation. The kind of place where you could smell ambition in the air, sharp and electric. I started as a junior analyst, just another cog in the machine. But I wasn't content to stay there. I worked harder than anyone else. I stayed late, poring over data sets while my colleagues were out drinking. I pitched ideas in meetings, even when my voice shook. And slowly, painfully, I started to climb. By the time I hit 30, I was a senior strategist, leading a team of my own. I wasn't just good at my job, I was exceptional. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying it because it's the truth. And the truth is what got me into this mess. My projects brought in millions for the company. My presentations left executives speechless. I had a knack for seeing patterns where others saw chaos, for turning risks into opportunities. And last year, at the annual company gala, they crowned me with the ultimate badge of honor. Top 1%. Out of thousands of employees, I was one of the elite, the untouchable. They handed me a plaque, shook my hand, and told me I was the future of Horizon. I stood on that stage, my heart pounding, my smile so wide it hurt. And I believed them. God, I was such a fool. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The cracks were already forming. Even then, I just didn't see them. You know how it is when you're so focused on your own path that you don't notice the vipers slithering in the grass. That was me, blissfully ignorant. The first hint came during a team meeting a few weeks before the gala. I'd just presented a new strategy for streamlining our client acquisition process, numbers, projections, the works. It was airtight. The kind of thing that could have saved the company millions. The room was silent when I finished. And for a moment, I thought it was all. Then Sarah, one of my colleagues, leaned back in her chair and said, "Wow, Eleanor, you really love stealing the spotlight, don't you?" Her tone was light, almost playful, but her eyes were cold, like she was sizing me up for a fight. The room laughed, and I laughed too, because what else could I do? But it stung. It was the kind of comment that burrows under your skin, makes you question yourself late at night when you're alone with your thoughts. Sarah wasn't the only one. Over the next few months, I started noticing things. Whispers that stopped when I entered the break room. Eye rolls when I spoke up in meetings. My team, the people I'd mentored and fought for, started pulling away. They'd cancel one-on-ones, miss deadlines, or forget to include me in email threads. At first, I thought I was being paranoid. I mean, I was killing it. Right, why would anyone resent me? But then there was Mark, my manager. Mark was the kind of guy who thrived on being the smartest person in the room. He'd hired me, mentored me, told me I was his star player. But after the gala, something shifted. He stopped praising my work. Instead, he'd nitpick question my methods, challenge my conclusions, even rewrite my reports behind my back. Once, he pulled me aside after a meeting and said, "Elena, you're doing great, but maybe tone it down a bit. You're making the rest of us look bad." He smiled when he said it. But it wasn't a joke. It was a warning. I should have listened. I should have seen the storm coming. But I didn't. I kept pushing, kept shining. Because that's who I was. I thought if I just worked harder, proved myself even more, they'd have to respect me. That's the lie we tell ourselves, isn't it? That merit always wins. That talent can't be ignored. But the truth is uglier. The truth is that success doesn't just breed admiration, it breeds envy. And envy is a quiet poison, seeping into the cracks of your life until everything crumbles. It wasn't just my colleagues. The higher-ups started to change too. I'd always had a good rapport with the C-suite, our CEO, Rachel, used to call me into her office to brainstorm over coffee. But after the gala, those invitations dried up. Instead, I'd catch her glancing at me during meetings, her expression unreadable. Once, I overheard her talking to Mark in the hallway. "Eleanor's brilliant," she said, "but she's a lot. We need team players, not rock stars. A lot." Me, the woman who'd spent years building their empire, who'd sacrificed everything for their bottom line. I felt like I'd been slapped. That I didn't confront her. I didn't confront anyone. I just kept my head down and worked harder, hoping I could outrun the whispers. And then came the project that changed everything. It was a massive client pitch, the kind of deal that could make or break a career. Horizon was competing against 3 other firms for a contract worth hundreds of millions. Mark put me in charge reluctantly. I could tell. He said, "Don't screw this up, Elena. We're all counting on you. No pressure, right?" I threw myself into it. Sleepless nights, endless revisions, mock presentations until my voice was hoarse. I built the pitch that wasn't just good, it was unforgettable. The kind of thing that makes jaws drop and wallets open. And when the day came, I delivered. The client CEO shook my hand afterward, tears in his eyes, and said, "You got a gift, Elena. We're in." I thought that was my moment, my redemption, the proof that no one could touch me. But I was wrong. So wrong, because that pitch, that triumph, was the final nail in my coffin. And the worst part, I didn't even see it coming. The high from that client pitch didn't last long. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, basking in the view, only to feel the ground give way beneath you. I walked into the office the next morning expecting applause, or at least a nod of approval from Mark. Instead, I got silence. The kind of silence that's louder than any scream. The kind that makes your skin prickle and your stomach twist. My team avoided my eyes as I passed their desks. Sarah was typing furiously, her lips pressed into a thin line. Even the intern, who usually greeted me with a nervous smile, stared at his shoes. I told myself it was nothing. People were busy. The win was still fresh. They'd come around. But deep down, I knew better. I'd felt this before, not at Horizon, but in smaller moments throughout my life. The cold shoulder, the unspoken resentment. It's what happens when you dare to rise above the crowd, when you refuse to dim your light to make others comfortable. I tried to shake it off. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and started drafting a follow-up email to the client. But my hands are trembling, and not from the coffee I'd chugged on my way in. It was like my body knew something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. Halfway through the email, Mark called me into his office. His voice was clipped, professional, the way it got when he was about to deliver bad news. I walked down the hall, my heels clicking against the polished floor, each step heavier than the last. By the time I sat across from him, My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear his words. Elena, he said, leaning back in his chair. You did a great job on the pitch. Really? The client's thrilled. I waited for the but. There's always a but. And then it came. But there's been some feedback, concerns, really, about your approach, my approach. I blinked at him, trying to process what he was saying. My approach had just landed us a deal that would keep the company in the black for years. What was there to criticize? That Mark wasn't meeting my eyes. He was shuffling papers on his desk, like he was too embarrassed or too guilty to look at me. Some people feel you're too intense, he went on, that you dominate projects, leave no room for collaboration. It's creating tension. Tension. That word hung in the air like smoke, choking me. I wanted to scream, to demand names, specifics, anything to make sense of this vague, cowardly attack. But I didn't. I sat there, my hands clenched in my lap, and asked, who said this? My voice was calm, but inside, I was unraveling. Mark sighed, like I was being difficult. It's not about pointing fingers, Elena. It's about the team. We need to think about what's best for everyone. Everyone. Not me. Not the woman who just delivered a miracle. Everyone else. I left his office in a daze. The rest of the day was a blur, meetings I barely heard, emails I couldn't focus on. I kept replaying his words, searching for the truth behind them. Was I too intense? Had I steamrolled my team without realizing it? I'd always prided myself on being collaborative, on lifting others up. I'd mentored half the analysts on our floor, stayed late to help them with their projects. But now, doubt was creeping in, gnawing at the edges of my confidence. Maybe I'd misread everything. Maybe I'd been so focused on winning that I'd alienated the people around me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I thought about Sarah's comment in that meeting months ago, about stealing the spotlight. I thought about the whispers, the eye rolls, the way Mark had written my reports. And then I thought about Rachel, the CEO, calling me a lot. It was starting to click, piece by painful piece. This wasn't about my approach. It wasn't about collaboration or tension. It was about jealousy. Pure, ugly jealousy. I'd made them feel small not because I wanted to, but because I dared to be big. And now, they were punishing me for it. The next few weeks were torture. I tried to keep my head down, to play the game. I toned down my ideas in meetings, let others take the lead. I even apologized to Sarah for any misunderstandings, though the words tasted like ash in my mouth. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. The whispers grew louder, the distance wider. My team stopped asking for my input. Mark started reassigning my projects to others, saying it was for balance. What a lie. They weren't balancing anything, they were erasing me. And then came the final blow. It was a Friday, the kind of grey, dreary day that makes you want to crawl back into bed. I was called into a meeting with HR. Not Mark, not Rachel, but a woman I'd never met before, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She slid a folder across the table and started talking about organizational fit and strategic realignment. I barely heard her. All I could focus on was the termination letter in front of me, my name typed in bold, like a death sentence. They were letting me go. No warning, no explanation, just a severance package and a request to clear out my desk by the end of the day. I didn't cry. Not then. I packed up my things, photos, notebooks, that stupid plaque from the gallon, walked out of the building with my head held high. But inside, I was breaking. I'd given Horizon everything, me time, my passion, my soul, and they'd thrown me away like I was nothing. All because I'd been too good, too bright, too much. When I got home, I collapsed onto my couch, the weight of it all crashing down on me. The rain was still falling, harder now, like the sky was mourning with me. I opened that bottle of wine, poured a glass, and stared at the email again. Effective immediately. I wanted to scream, to rage, to call every single one of them and demand answers. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there, letting the pain wash over me, letting it carve out a space in my heart where anger and betrayal would live for a long, long time. The days after my firing blurred into a haze of grief and fury. I didn't leave my apartment for a week. I couldn't. Every time I thought about stepping outside, I'd see their face marks, fake concern, Sarah's smug smirk, Rachel's cold indifference, and my knees would buckle. I'd built my entire identity around Horizon, around being the best. And now that was gone, stripped away in a single, heartless moment. I kept asking myself what I'd done wrong, where I'd misstepped. Was it the pitch, the gala, the way I carried myself, with confidence that bordered on defiance? But the more I turned it over in my mind, the clearer it became. My only crime was being me, unapologetically, relentlessly me. I started scrolling through LinkedIn, torturing myself with updates from my former colleagues. Sarah had been promoted to my old role. Surprise. Mark was posting about team synergy and new beginnings, as if I'd never existed. Even the intern had a shiny new title. It was like they'd all moved on, erased me from their story, while I was stuck in this limbo of self-doubt and rage. I wanted to message them, to call them out, to scream about the injustice of it all. But what would that accomplish? They'd already won. They'd dimmed my light, and I was letting them keep it that way. Then one night, something shifted. I was sitting on my couch, same spot, same wine, same rain, when I stumbled across an old photo on my phone. It was me, 22, fresh out of college, standing in front of my first apartment in the city. I looked terrified but determined, like I knew the world was going to try to break me and I was ready to fight anyway. That girl didn't care about fitting in. She didn't dim herself for anyone. And somewhere along the way, I'd lost her. I'd let Horizon, with its promises and its posants, convinced me that I needed their approval to shine. I closed the photo and opened my laptop. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I started typing about the gala, the pitch, the whispers, the betrayal. I wrote until my fingers ached, until the words spilled out like blood from a wound. It wasn't polished or professional. It was raw, messy, real. And when I was done, I didn't send it to Mark or Sarah or Rachel. I didn't need their validation anymore. Instead, I posted it online, anonymously, on a forum for professionals. I called it The Cost of Being Too Good. I didn't expect anyone to read it. I just needed to let it out, to reclaim my story. But people did read it. Hundreds, then thousands. Comments poured in, strangers sharing their own stories of jealousy, of being punished for their success. A woman who'd been passed over for a promotion because her boss felt threatened. A man who'd been ostracized for outshining his team. Each story was a mirror, reflecting my pain back at me, but also showing me I wasn't alone. I wasn't broken. I was just human, caught in a world that sometimes fears excellence more than it celebrates it. That post changed everything. It wasn't just catharsis, it was a spark. I started writing more, not just about Horizon, but about the bigger picture. The way workplaces breed competition, the way envy festers in silence, the way we're taught to shrink ourselves to fit someone else's comfort zone. I started a blog, then a newsletter. People reached out, asking me to speak, to share my story. I wasn't ready for that yet. My wounds were still too fresh, but I kept writing, kept connecting. And slowly, I started to rebuild. I won't lie and say it was easy. There were days when the anger came back, sharp and suffocating. Days when I'd see an email from a headhunter and freeze, terrified to step back into that world. But I wasn't the same Elena anymore. I wasn't the woman who'd begged for Horizon's approval, who dimmed herself to avoid their jealousy. I was something new, something stronger. I started consulting, taking on freelance projects for startups that valued my fire instead of fearing it. I set my own terms, worked with people who saw my worth, and every time I landed a new client, every time I closed a deal, I felt that old spark reignited, one that had carried me through those early years, the one that refused to let me settle. I think about Horizon sometimes, but not with the same bitterness. They didn't break me, they forged me. They showed me what happens when you let envy win, but they also taught me how to rise above it. I don't need their plaque or their praise anymore. I don't need to be in the top 1% of someone else's game. I'm writing my own rules now, building my own empire, one where no one gets to tell me I'm too much. So here I am, 6 months later, still standing, still shining. The rain's still falling outside, but it doesn't feel like it's drowning me anymore. It feels like it's washing away the last of their poison, leaving me clean, ready for whatever comes next. And if you're out there, watching this, feeling like your light's too bright for the room you're in, don't dim it. Don't let them make you small. Shine harder. Let them choke on their jealousy. Because the truth is, the world doesn't just need your talent, it needs your fire. And no one, not a colleague, not a boss, not an entire company, gets to take that away from you.